Oh, jeez, it's not warm. Here I am, floating in the frigid Antarctic Ocean. Man, tell you what, these sub-zero temperatures are really starting to get on my nerves.
What a predicament.
It's the What a Predicament podcast, back for the third week in a row to probe the inner mechanisms behind another predicament that's plaguing the populace. I'm Alex Bain. I've been floating here, drinking nothing but salt water and eating nothing but krill for the last week, and it's got me thinking about some of the other predicaments people find themselves in. So, naturally, floating here in the Antarctic Ocean as I am, one question arises: what happened to Deja Voodoo? Deja Voodoo were a Kiwi rock group / faux late-night house band known for hits like Beers, Too Late, Tomorrow, Timaroo, Can't Do, and We Are Deja Voodoo. Our public perception might consider them a joke band in the vein of Tenacious D, The Tap, Flight of the Conchords, or One Direction, but part of this perception might come from people of my generation that grew up with them on Back of the Wire Masterpiece Television, which came on late night TV in New Zealand, at least during my formative years, with its screaming voiceovers, the outrageous stunts, the great physical props constructed, and the sets. I fell in love with its sort of anti-establishment, backyard wrestling crudeness. Back of the Wire Masterpiece Television embraced New Zealand's baser tendencies in a flurry of violence and toilet humour, all to the grunge rock soundtrack of Deja Voodoo. I tracked down voodoo guitarist Gerald Stewart, also of the Brunettes and Radio Hauraki fame, and sat down with him over a beer to get the inside scoop on whether the band itself was as much of a laugh as the rest of the country thought. I was going to say, did you bring some of your own beers?
Yeah, well, no, I'm just stealing the Hauraki ones, which I consider my own.
I was saying I'd give you one of mine, but I've only got 6.
Well, we're starting there, are we?
Starting low. It gets worse. If there is some loser out there who hasn't heard of Deja Voodoo, who are Deja Voodoo?
Well, they were a spin-off band from a TV show that was never quite popular, became kind of cult-like, and the band itself had a brief flourishing of being reasonably commercial for 5 seconds and parlayed it into, I suppose we had a good 8 or 10 year run of getting paid to go to play to university students and tour around in summer times and all that kind of stuff.
So was it created for the show, or it had a life before Back of the Wire?
Well, Deja Voodoo, the actual name, comes from the show as far as I know, but the musical roots of it go back to Dunedin, where Matt and Chris and a bunch of other guys were in a flat on Park Street. They were known as the Park Street Boys, and they had a band called Kid Eternity, who were they were uber cool at the time, early 90s, and then that's kind of the original roots of the entire thing musically. Like, they'd always done videos and stuff which turned into the Back of the Wire thing, which was pretty much from the Mothra competitions they had at the university every year, where I think they'd even give you a camera for a few days. And it was a very group effort in the early days with Phil and a bunch of other guys, and it used to win heaps of the Mothras every year, which they'd spend on beer. So there was always this kind of... Kid Eternity always had a comedy on stage element to it. They were drunk artists, and you never knew what was going to happen with them on stage. They'd fall over halfway through an intro and start it again, which Deja Voodoo became famous for. There's a lot of stuff that became Deja Voodoo, which started out in the early days with Kid Eternity, I'd say, in Dunedin.
Did you think of it as a joke band? Obviously, you have to take the recording and performing seriously. You can't be clowns, but did you think of it a joke band, like a Tenacious D, like comedy rock, or it was a real band that you just used humour as an element in your performances? And
we didn't consider the two things mutually exclusive, if you know what I mean. Like, we were both. We were a band, and it was supposed to be funny, and it was satirical, which, I mean, there always was an internal dynamic within the band of how jokey should we be and how much do we care about the music. Not that it was, we always cared heaps about the music. Like, we always wrote the best songs we possibly could. And like we always used to say, like most bands usually have stupid lyrics they have for a song when they write it, and then they change them to be serious lyrics. We just never changed them to be serious lyrics. We considered ourselves almost more authentic like that. Like the reason we loved each other and liked playing music together was because it was fun to get drunk and make each other laugh. And that was always just part and parcel of that band. That was what that band did. It was a drunken, funny, good time. So it was, but if the songs didn't work, the jokes didn't work, and without the band being live, it was always a weird perception in the band because we were aware from outside how weird it was, the band. I mean, it was a weird band to be in the first place. It's not like a normal band, Deja Voodoo, because it did have the TV, it did have the idea that it was supposed to be drunken and funny.
So you got started in Dunedin, or the band's roots were there. How Dunedin's in New Zealand, it's like a Seattle or something. There's a definite trend or a definite sound that's associated with Dunedin. I believe they even call it the Dunedin sound. Where do you see Deja Voodoo in that, or is it a separate thing?
I mean, if you go back to the roots of it way back at Kid Eternity, they were always quite a reactionary band. Like I say, they were funny and drunken live. They didn't take themselves too seriously, which in Dunedin was very unusual at the time because everyone was kind of like post-Flying the Unseen, but still very, very... There was still many a band you could see on a Friday or Saturday night who'd all be wearing all black with big, baggy black jerseys, and the guitarist would have like a Roland chorus amp. They seemed to be huge, and it'd be like a semi-acoustic like kind of guitar like going through a distortion pedal and a delay, and they'd play with their back to the audience, and it'd just be cathedrals of kind of, you know, high school poetry kind of stuff, very serious. Whereas we were all just young guys who came from small towns who liked getting drunk, and we liked Guns N' Roses, and we liked The Cure as well. But we're also massively massively informed by the young ones as well. So the idea of comedy was always built pretty strongly into it.
Mm.
The real trouble with a joke song is that they're normally 2.5, 3.5 minutes at least, if you know what I mean. And to sustain a gag over that long, if all that song's got to offer is one punchline, you can't really make it through the 3 minutes. You know, you need to, it almost needs to be a better song to sustain the joke, if you know what I mean.
It's funny because even a song like, you know, Too Late Tomorrow, Timaru or whatever, to me the joke is like, you see Rolliston or Hornby in a song, like that's funny because it's so regional specific, and I think for me it's like being from Christchurch, seeing that on TV, it would be on C4 or whatever. Yeah, you'd be like, oh my God, they mentioned
well, that's
Rolliston.
A classic. That song was written as a tribute to the Exponents and Jordan Luck, pretty much. It's like supposedly a song written by a second-rate Exponent-style band from the 80s. Matt and Chris did this recording project one summer. It was called New Zealand's Greatest Misses, and it was these weird songs, and they had these stories behind these bands that were, some of them were like the band that was behind a milk ad.
Like they made it up.
Yeah, and they'd actually make the song. Some of them actually took parts from ads or whatever. But Today, Tomorrow, Timaru was a band called the Geraldines, if I remember rightly. And it was basically, it was the best Exponents song that Matt and Chris could write. And that's why, like, years later, we actually played a version of it with Jordan singing it. I'd love to hear that. I really want to get a version of it. I haven't been able to find it. It was
like, just a one-off gig.
Yeah, I forget what it was for. It was like a New Zealand program or something, but basically Jordan actually went and re-sung the song over our backing track, and then we mimed a version
in his own style, or he
and
kind
it was super Inception style, right? Because it was written in imitation and love of Jordan, but it was supposed to sound like. But when Jordan did it, he changed the inflection slightly and more Jordanized them, which to us was like nirvana. It was like Jordan's taken it and made it even more Jordan, more perfectly like. Yeah. So he sung it like
here's flattering you, flattering him.
Yeah, he just nailed it. So, and then we started singing Today, Tomorrow, Timaru like he did, but it didn't work because obviously when you play live, none of the people in the audience had really heard the Jordan version. So when we changed our inflections to imitate Jordan...
I'm picturing it in my head now. Yeah. I can hear him doing it.
It was totally... So we had to stop and actually go back and relearn the song because we'd changed it to sing it like Jordan did, but the audiences didn't recognise it, so they wouldn't sing along.
Did you guys ever do covers and stuff? When you like just throw in a set, we'll throw in
there was
Dave Dobbin song.
Well, Are You Old Enough was the only cover we ever did that I remember. Yeah, we used to do it as an intro and outros. It had various points in the set. We played it on Top of the Pops one time. Dragon got to hear about it. They were awfully upset. I was quite proud of it. Like, we went on Top of the Pops and played it, and I still hadn't worked out how to play it properly yet. And we did a horrible shambolic version of it. But we actually worked out.
I guess there must have been a
version.
version.
But this actual song is actually quite subtle and has these nice changes in it. And we just like hot rodded it, just tore the doors off it and stripped it down to 3 chords. And I was quite proud of that because by the end, like the Top of the Pops wasn't our best performance of the song, but we used to nail it by the end. We'd cut it right down, like the Blink 182 version of it, and it used to go very well live. And it's because we always found the lyrics hilarious. It's one of the funniest songs. Television and the red, red wine. Won't you tell me the truth? Are you old enough? It's like, what the hell?
What was the first thing you actually got into a studio and worked on?
Well, it's long story short, I ended up in Auckland, ended up on the indie scene playing with the Bloody Souls and kind of part of the Datsuns and then that whole thing happening in the early 2000s. And then I joined the Brunettes and toured overseas with them doing the whole pop thing. And then I got back and got fired from that band. And then basically I think I was living with Matt and Chris, and they were looking for a new drummer at that point because basically Brent Eccles, the manager, had fired the original drummer. And I got pulled into the studio to audition for drums, but they needed some rhythm guitar and lead guitar parts for. I think they had 2 songs left on the album, which was More Beers and Pee off the first album. And basically, it came out that I played guitar, so they threw a guitar at me, and I just basically laid down some rhythm parts and did a solo. And Brent really liked it, and pretty much decided that I was going to join the band as the second guitarist, rhythm guitarist, and they'd find another drummer. So that's me playing guitar on More Beers and Pee on the first album, and that was my first time in the studio, which was pretty much, I thought I was there to audition for drums and got handed a guitar and nailed it.
Who would you say it sounds like Brent Eccles was quite a driving force in like making this thing happen.
Yeah, he was the Svengali. I mean, the band really was a really fast punk 3-piece before. The origins of Deja Voodoo as the band was they had the TV thing and they decided, being more than anything, just because Matt and Chris play music anyway and already had, and there had been a big history of them doing stuff. So they decided to do a band called Deja Voodoo, which is typical those guys' kind of sense of humour because it's like it's this fake band that they made up for their TV show. And then to make that band a real band, so it's a real band based on a fake band, is, too perfect. And they just had the 3-piece with full-on drums, which is the actual band you see when you see them on the back of the way miming, that's the actual guys who were the original Deja Voodoo, but none of that music is actually music Deja Voodoo played live, you know what I mean? They had this other set of songs.
Hi, this is Brent Eccles. I produced 2 albums with Deja Voodoo. Their 2 biggest albums.
When, Brent, did you first hear of Deja Voodoo?
I first heard of them through Matt Heath and through someone at my office, and Matt played me some demos of some songs they had that they were going to release. And I said, hey, hang on a second, let's try and record these properly. So we went into the studio and just started to experiment and record songs, and they came out great. So we decided to go ahead and record a full album.
Cool. I was talking to Gerald, and he said when he first came across them as well, they had a much different sound. He said they were a faster, more sort of hardcore sound. Was that the case when you were first working with them?
I don't think so. No, I think that they're a rock band, a guitar-based rock band, and it just was I thought it just needed to be just recorded better, and that's what we did.
Cool. What, in your mind, looking at the band as a whole, what set them apart from just your average, 4-piece rock group?
Oh, there were a couple of things that made them unique. One was their sense of humour. And the other thing was the sense of humour was delivered pretty much deadpan, and they were good at what they did. Some great vocals, some really good guitar playing, and great lyrics too, I thought.
It's a different kind of group when you think about it. The fact that they had this popular TV show, or popular in certain demos, to sort of back them up and support them and get them a different audience. How do you think? What was it like having that to work with?
Well, you would imagine that would have given it a big leg up, but I'm not sure that it actually did. I know that the songs became a soundtrack on a lot of the TV series, but I thought that it would have taken them to a broader audience than it did. Their audience was still kind of specialised, put it that way.
According to Wikipedia, which is where I get most of my information, the band signed a 4-figure deal with Liberation before the first album. We're talking high 4 figures?
Modest 4 figures.
Sort of middling 4 figures?
Yeah. That's true.
Could you talk about what you can sort of recall about getting into the studio for that first album and working it out?
Well, what I recall is that once we got started, we really got on a roll, and we went through a few musician changes, with drums and guitar on a couple. We had some good guests come in and play, but the structures of the songs got better and better and better, and I think hopefully the guys could see I could actually bring something to their sessions that improved them to a degree. They still had the creative thing going, and it was always their material. But I think the songs got better structure and just got better and better and better as we recorded more. And
what about the follow-up, the second album?
Well, I think their expectations changed. They obviously had the experience of the first one, and making the dreaded second album. I think was still good. Brown Sabbath, but. I don't think it kind of took the band that much further than what they got on the first record, and I think they probably became a bit distracted because they became, quite well known and got other things going. So, they had more than just a band. They had TV shows and radio and all sorts of things, which is good. But the second album may have suffered a little bit for that.
That was a big one. There was quite a lot of work went into that one. In terms of, we'd actually toured quite a lot playing together as a 4-piece, and we had not a lot of song ideas. Like, whenever we went to the studio, especially, well, it wasn't that, but it was always like Equal wanted us to write more, which was actually fair enough, but we got to the point where we had like 12 or 13 songs, and it's actually a huge mission to go and record 12 or 13 songs.
It wasn't like the format where you hear a lot of bands, they write 60 songs and make it to a tight 12.
No, we should have probably, but we could never write that many, And it was always like, what's wrong with the ones we've written, kind of. But yeah, and so there was that album there's 2 or 3 songs on that which were finished in a smaller studio, which I don't think it sound as good as they could. But yeah, it was the first album where I wrote some music on it, and it's all my guitar on it, and it's actually all Matt and Chris and Piers. Like, that is actually just Deja Voodoo playing, whereas the first album, a lot of it is outside players coming in. So it's kind of it was that album where we'd toured lots, and we were kind of felt like we were pretty good as a band, even though we weren't that great. But we got through it, and there's a lot of my favourite Deja Voodoo moments on that second album. But for me personally, I feel like, there's like 3 or 4 songs we kind of ran out of steam at the end of the recording process. They're good songs, but they could have done with a bit more polish and didn't sound as grunty as the other ones, I don't reckon.
How did the second album do compared to the first one?
About the same-ish, but there was a lot more put into it. It was a very weird time. It was like, I remember that was the time where like LMNOP and Stereogram and bands like Stella had actually shipped like 120,000 units in New Zealand of CDs at that point. And LMNOP had done like 80,000 or something like that of their first album.
You've got to be grateful, actually, because you'd have to think you're right at the end of the CD buying years.
Yeah, well, we kind of hit the cusp. We never sold more than 2,000 or 3,000. And I think the first album probably did a wee bit more than that. But at the same time as we were selling 2 or 3, LMNOP, who had been sold 80 of their first album, were selling 20 or 15 of their second album. Like, it was that weird 2000s point where everyone's CD sales just dropped quite dramatically at that point.
It was just like 1 year when it fell off.
Yeah, and it was over a period, I suppose, but it was like over the year or so that the album was being made. If you count the whole touring and kind of writing style of it. But yeah, it was definitely, you could tell that the record company wanted a bit more of a return on their investment, but we weren't really getting it back from CDs. I mean, I think when we were let out of our contract, we were tens of thousands of dollars in debt to the record company for tour support and stuff. So I think we were on that cusp of It looked like we'd do quite well, but by the time we got to the second album, yeah, it was thousands, if not tens of thousands of units we were selling.
So tell me about the third album, because this is the one where I didn't know until recently there was a third album.
Yeah,
and I liked the band. I'd bought the at least the first one. I think the second one as well.
Well, after the second album and the whole thing and the slightly disappointing sales, we'd pretty much broken up. I think there'd been one particularly spectacularly bad gig where we'd gone down to Hamilton to play some guy's high school party or whatever. He'd ponied up the money, which was thousands of dollars, to get us to play. So we went down and did it, and basically it was at this hall in the middle of a park, and nobody came into the gig, and all these kids outside drinking out of riggers in the park, and this kid took a bath. They must have lost so much money on the gig. And we were pretty much after that, we decided not to do any more gigs like that. We'd done some gigs like magazine launches and stuff, and it was just, it wasn't fun. So we were at that whole, we don't want to do things that aren't fun anymore. And then, the band kind of petered out.
What was the your proudest moment of what you achieved as the band?
Well, for me personally, I'm pretty happy with Punisher, because that was one that I wrote the chord sequence for, and I really like my solo on that one, and probably Can't Do as well. I really love that song and love the two guitar interplay on it, and I really like my solo on that one. But yeah, it was always a joy for me, because it's guitar and I was the lead guitarist, so I just got to wail, and the music was nice, simple 3-chord music to wail over. So I would go back and do it in a minute. Being the lead guitar in a rock band's a pretty sweet gig.
What was your most rock star moment, like on stage, or
I think
smashing a guitar on stage?
The biggest rock star moment would be, for me personally, when we were touring when She Had came back, and it was the first tour they did, and they had that new EP out, and we did like 4 or 5 gigs in the Upper North Island. But there was a big gig on the Coromandel, and we went out, and there was a Deja Voodoo chant before we went on stage, and like, especially as an opening band, to get a chant from the audience before you go on stage, it's quite it doesn't usually happen. So we were backstage, and She had been killing it on this gig, on this tour, and they were ruling. And, we felt like the amateurs compared to their awesomeness. But I just remember that night we were backstage. It was our 3rd or 4th gig, and we were playing quite well, and we were enjoying it. And the first chant started, and it was Deja Voodoo, Deja Voodoo, and we're like behind the trailer having a cigarette and a beer or whatever, getting ready to go on, and it like really perked our hackles up. I was like, holy shit, they're chanting for us, especially as the opening band. And then the chant changed to Deja Voodoo, if you know what I mean. And then the chant changed and it kind of faded away, and we're like, holy shit, and it really got us ready. And then I just remember hitting the stage, and the crowd lit up, and they just were chanting Deja Voodoo, and we were playing really well. The audience was really into it. We had a great ass time. I remember like jumping off the stage into the the gully between the fence and the thing, and just playing my guitar up on the fence with people. And I remember getting back on stage is a lot harder than it looks after you've jumped off the fucking stage. So that was a pretty rock star moment. I remember we got off stage that night, and it was a feeling of, we did that justice.
A buzz.
Yeah, we played really, really well, and the audience really enjoyed it.
Did you ever get to the point where you could get like a rider? Or it's like, no, Ozzy wouldn't go on stage unless he had his brown M&Ms.
We always had a rider. For years we had Alamano P's rider, I think, because we got asked for a rider once, and Matt, as a joke, just sent an Alamano P's rider. And for years afterwards we'd get like 2 bottles of red wine and stuff. But we always had a rider. We'd always bring extra beer above our rider, because we'd always be like, they would always never give us enough beer. No matter how much beer was never enough. So we'd always have we had a fake amp that had no speaker in it. We just used to fill that full of beers, because we were drunken artists. So we'd always make sure we had enough beer with us that if there was no beer at the venue, we'd still be fine.
How many beers does it take to get a 4-piece good and ready to go on stage?
Well, the official Deja Voodoo idea, like what we used to try to stick to, is don't eat any food for at least a couple of hours before you're going to go on stage. We'd made the mistake on tour of having a big feed and then going to rock, and it's not good. And we'd usually start drinking half an hour to 45 minutes out from the gig. And usually out from the gig, you're a bit nervous and stuff. So we'd usually chop in the region of 3 to 4 beers each in the half an hour or whatever till we hit the stage. And then when you're on stage, as many as you want. So I'd usually have at least 6 or 8 on stage with me.
And you were a tight enough guitarist that it didn't really... You ever have any sloppy moments where it's like, a couple too many, and I just got to stick to power chords?
There's been ones where I was aware of it, and if you're at the point where you're aware of it, you're pretty far gone.
When did you start seeing the signs that that's about it? Was it a case of everyone was doing other projects already? Or?
It was always that from the start, if you know what I mean. Like, it was, we'd had the relationship going back to Dunedin anyway. It was like, there was a friendship outside the band that was always going to be there. So the band was always, and we were reasonably self-aware that it was an unusual thing that through the TV show and stuff, the band had the notoriety it did. We never really expected to get as much success as we did.
Like, was it ever officially disbanded? Just kind of as like...
No, well, kind of. We did our last gig for Ricky for his birthday. Basically, Ricky, nobody used to like Deja Voodoo when I was in the band of our friends. We were completely uncool. And especially in Auckland, we couldn't, it was hard for us to get out 200 people in Auckland towards the end because we were just so out of fashion. But Ricky was a friend of ours. He just loved the band. So we were like, because he was into the band, we were like, yeah, we'll get back together and play for you. And we played at the Whammy, and it just went mental. So any gig I've ever been at where the crowd has ripped the monitors out of the front of the stage and passed them over their heads to the back of the room.
Holy crap.
We came there to get our gear out the next day. They were like, yeah, they just tore the monitors out of the place. And they did. They just, the last song, the whole place just erupted.
Talk about ending on a high note.
I know. That's the thing, we're such old friends that we may well get together and do music together in different parts.
Different form.
Yeah. Most bands have a lifetime. We did 3 albums, which was pretty amazing. And we made, I think, at least 6 videos. And this is, I didn't join the band till I was 31, 32. So it was like a late blooming of a musical friendship. And I'm really proud of all the music we made together. It went way further than it was supposed to in the first place, if you know what I mean. The fact that we went as long as we did is quite miraculous, really. So the idea that somehow we didn't do everything that was needed to be done by the band, I feel like the band was finite, but in a good way. And I don't think there's any need for it to be around. We're on our 5th album by now. I mean, I don't really think it'd be for anyone,
Did you ever make any money off the band?
Yeah, we used to do all right out of touring. Like I say, we were tens of thousands of dollars in debt to our record label when they let us go, and they were good. They let us go and let us out of our contract pretty easily, which is pretty par for the course, really. But I did. It was a great part-time hustle, if you know what I mean. When I was working my job, if I did...
You're not seeing sort of APRA royalties and stuff?
No, there's been $5 every now and then. There were some good ones back in the day where it was used for stuff, but... And we'd do your big day outs and stuff for a good payday, and the orientations, they'd fly us there, put us up in a motel for a night, and we'd be making what I consider good money each a night to do it. Yeah, it was good money. It wasn't great money, but yeah, we even remained popular for many years. Orientations especially. We played, I don't know, we played a lot of orientations. We played pretty much every city in the country.
Deja Voodoo may remain just a legend to some, early noughties nostalgia, but they're all still out there, each involved in creating cool stuff, and you never know, maybe one day there'll be a Python-style reunion of long, scraggly-haired, grey-haired Southlanders in leather jackets taking the stage at the Auckland Town Hall, sober but still singing about the woes of having to part with a single beer when you only have 6, to a new generation of fans who weren't even born in the 80s. Thanks to Gerald Stewart, Brent Eccles, Carolina Simpson and Tim Raby. The opening theme music for this podcast is a derivative of The Little Hotel of Horrors by Decamentarium, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 4.0. You like yourself a bit of Deja Voodoo? How would you like to score yourself a copy of Brown Sabbath on vinyl? Gerald was kind enough to hook me up with 5 copies to give away to listeners of the podcast. So, if you want a copy, email me at whatacatproductions@gmail.com. Let me know, and I'll be selecting the first 5 people who touch base and mailing you out an LP. Brown Sabbath on vinyl. Thanks again to Gerald Stewart. You can catch him on Saturday evenings on Radio Hauraki on his show, The Saturday Shambles, which streams via their website, hauraki.co.nz. And that's for my legion of international fans. New Zealanders can catch it on terrestrial radio. This podcast has been a What a Cat production. Find us, and by us I mean me, on the web at whatacat.co.nz. All the other episodes of this podcast will be up there as well. You can also subscribe to it on iTunes. Thank you for finding this and for listening. Well, I wouldn't recommend spending a week floating in the Antarctic Ocean. It's really quite cold. Oh, what's that? It sounds like a... Oh my... So, I'm no longer floating in the ocean, but instead I've been swallowed by some sort of enormous whale. Will I find God here, a la Jonah, or will I instead while away the whale's 18-hour digestive cycle by scratching the surface of another public predicament? Find out next week on What a Predicament.